assalamu alaikum. This is Irene Aftab Ali, back to you all after a very long break. Here I am again with a brand new video, and on today's video I'm focusing on speaking on sample answers for IELTS question, and today I would be discussing questions from Cambridge 17 IELTS. So I'm going to start by explaining and discussing the part 1 questionnaires. So in part 1, as you all might already know, that the examiner asks candidates very basic questions, one-on-one questions, where the examiner tries to make the candidate feel a bit more comfortable while asking questions that require very brief answers. It is important to keep in mind that while answering this question, the candidate understand what kind of tense they need to use. If the question is based on events or facts happening on past, the candidate should answer using past tense. So let's look at some examples. What did you study in history lessons when you were at school? So see, here the examiner wants you to tell them about things that you studied, you learned during a lesson, a subject that happened in your past. So when answering, you need to keep that in mind. The sample answer that I set for this question is, oh, history was a subject that I dreaded the most. So here in this sentence, you're explaining how you felt about the subject. You start with an exclamatory word, oh, to bring in a fluency in your speaking, as that is also a part of the requirement in your IELTS test. It was all about names of people and dates and days to remember from the past. So here you're describing what was the lessons like, what was the part of the lessons, what were the things that lesson mainly focused on. Mostly we were taught about innovations and wars of the past. So in this sentence, you tell the examiner what you learned. So you were taught, instead of saying we learned about, you changed the structure and say that we were taught about, that the teacher taught you these things, which means you learned it. So the teacher taught you about innovation and wars from the past. The next question that I'm going to look into is, did you enjoy studying history at school? Why or why not? In this question, the examiner would expect an explanation for whether your answer is a yes or no. So my sample answer would be, no, not at all. Again, I'm starting with a phrase just to bring in fluency in your speaking. No, not at all. History chapters were lengthy with loads of information. Too many dates and names to remember. Again, you're describing how you felt about the subject. It was difficult for me. I used to perform bad on history tests, so I particularly was not a fan of that subject. Here, you're explaining the feeling, how you felt about it, and why you didn't like it with an explanation. You're giving an explanation for why you didn't like that subject. You couldn't remember the dates. Next, we're going to look into the question, how often do you watch TV programs about history now? Again, this question also requires an explanation. But in this question, the examiner is not asking you anything focusing on your past. In fact, now the examiner is actually focusing on your present time. In this time, do you enjoy history programs or not? So you have to change your answers into present time. To be frank, I don't watch historical documentaries or any of that sort at all. Here again, any of that sort at all, these words are just bringing in more fluency while you're speaking. Because in dramas, they often change facts. So with a very simple line, you're explaining why you don't watch historical documentaries. But, so again, here you're bringing in more information. I do sometimes binge watch period dramas, the word period drama being a synonym for historical drama. So here you are showing your, you have variety of vocabulary to offer. Period dramas like Vikings, Eartha and such. So again, you were giving example, you're showing fluency, you're showing your ability to play with words. The next question: which period in history would you like to learn more about? Again, this question also requires an explanation. None, in fact. Again, phrase just to bring in the fluency. We learn from the past and create history as we go. So here you're kind of bringing in your internal philosophical knowledge, again, to show that you can make sentence, you can offer, a variety of words. Plus, in the meantime, you're kind of explaining yourself. There are many things that have happened in the past that was brutal and horrific. I'm glad I wasn't part of those times. So here you're explaining you don't want to learn anything more about any specific period of time and why you don't want to learn about it. Moving to the second part of the test, this is where the examiner usually asks the candidate to talk on their own about a particular topic. So for this question, the examiner would be asking you, the topic would be, describe the neighborhood you lived in when you were a child. So the main topic would be, you would be describing a neighborhood that you lived in the past. And while you are talking about it, while you are describing how your neighborhood looked like, how it felt like, describing should include, when anyone asks you to describe something in speaking or in writing, you should be using your 5 senses: what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you feel. So your 5 senses, using those things, you can describe any person, place or object or any event. So again, when the question asks describe the neighborhood, the examiner would expect you to create a visual for the neighborhood that you lived in. And while describing, you should make sure that there are certain points that you talk about. In IELTS exam, they usually, in the cue card, they point out things that they want you to discuss. For example, here they have said where in your town or city the neighborhood was. Basically, they want to know the location of your neighborhood. What kind of people lived there? They would want to know what kind of people lived there. Good people, bad people. Again, here you'll be describing the people that you lived with, what it was like to live in this neighborhood. So here you'd be describing how you felt while you were living there, and explain whether you would like to live in this neighborhood in the future. So there again, you'll need to give an explanation for your choice, whether you would like to live there or not live there. So here's a very short answer that I prepared. I grew up in the southern part of any city you can name, and obviously with depending on your answer, the southern, northern, eastern can change. These type of words shows your range of the range of words you can have to access, and it helps to describe the place, the parts, the location. It was the oldest part of the now developed metro city. So here you're kind of giving the visual of that the area that you lived in, it was an old part, it was not developed. People in my neighborhood were those who had roots of them, most of them were born here and lived in their ancestral houses. So you're again giving kind of an information what type of people they were, which was part of your question, and describing what type of houses they were. So obviously if those are ancestral houses, they were very old antique houses. It was very tight community, overcrowded with houses locked in arms with each other. So here again, you're describing the area that you lived in, giving the examiner a visual that houses were very tight, it was very overcrowded, the houses were situated very close to each other. Everyone knew everyone. Growing up, we never feared going out alone, as it always felt safe in the streets. So here you're describing how you felt about your neighborhood and why. I still go there during festivals, but sadly, as it has become an overpopulated area, I don't see myself living there anymore. So here you're again explaining the last part of the question, that whether you want to live there or not and why. So you're giving a reason and explaining. My answer here, the sample answer I've provided is short. You could expand it even more by including things that can be seen in that area, like what colors of houses there are, how are the streets very narrow or bigger streets, how far was the school, or any activity that you used to do in childhood. Coming to the last part of the speaking test, on part 3, usually the examiner would be asking additional questions based on or relevant to your part 2 question. So as in the part 2, the question was mostly focused on neighbors, they might ask you questions like, what sort of things can neighbors do to help each other? Well, neighbors could look out for each other, support and create safe environment for each other, so community becomes more united, like old times. So when asked a question, it doesn't matter what question the examiner asks, because obviously with different part 2 topic, the questions would be changing. What you need to keep in focus is you have to show variety of word, and while explaining like what kind of things you expect neighbors to do, you need to, whatever the question is, you need to give an explanation. So one of the trick that I used to teach my students, or I tend to follow, is for every answer of the question, there's an answer and there's an explanation. So there's a point and then there's an explanation. This is my point and this is why this is my point, the explanation of that point. So as you can see here, I have said that these are the things that the neighbor could do to help each other, and I have provided a reason why they should be doing it. Another question that you might face is, how well do people generally know their neighbors in your country? It depends on which part of the country you are from, obviously, because it depends. If you come, so here again I'm explaining that in the smaller cities and older parts of modern cities, so see here you're showing variety of words. People know their next door residents very well. But in places like developed areas of cities with high-rise buildings and apartments, people don't really know each other anymore. So your answer is it's not a straightforward answer that yes, in my country people are very tight and close. They're all, in the meantime, you're not saying that people don't know their neighbors. You're giving a great explanation. How important do you think it is to have good neighbors? From where I see, so this is a phrase that it can be used instead of in my opinion, or according to me, or I think, or I believe. From where I see, I genuinely believe that after our family, it's our neighbors that are closest to us. So here you're showing your personal point of view. And we should have strong bond with people living near us, so here you're saying, this is my point of view, this is how I feel, that we should have a close bond. Now you're giving the explanation. So now you're explaining the because. We can help each other in times of need. So rather than saying difficult times, you're using more standard word, in times of need. Another type of question that could be asked in part 3 based on the topic in number 2 is facilities, because we have discussed neighbors and cities, so there are questions like questions focusing on the theme facilities could be asked. So which facilities are most important to people living in cities? This is a very genuine question. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to brainstorm about it. Usually it's the transportation, security, safe and smooth utility supply. That is what anyone needs in anywhere they're living. How does shopping in small local shops differ from shopping in large city centre shops? So from the question, you have to change city centres and small shop. You have to change these two words to show your vocabulary. I suppose, again, instead of in my opinion, I'm using another phrase, I suppose, to bring more fluency. Major difference among, rather than using the word between, here I will use the word among. Shopping from malls and local market are that smaller business have cheaper price, also less product and variety. So here you're giving an explanation what smaller business, that means local shops or small shops, have, whereas shopping centers have high-end stores with more choice of products. Moreover, some malls nowadays have indoor game centers for kids and food courts too. So again, you're given an explanation why or how it is different in malls and in comparison to smaller shops. Do you think that the children should always go to school nearest to where they live? Well, obviously, again, phrase to bring in connecting words and phrase to bring in more fluency. Living closer to school saves a lot of time and energy for both parents and children, preventing children from missing out on school. So here you're explaining an advantage of living near the school. Or being late, however, instead of but, I've used the word however, and it brings a contradictory idea. Ultimately, what matters most is whether the school offers quality education or not. And parents should judge that before choosing school. So here you're giving your opinion, what matters most while choosing a school. So that's about it for today. I hope this helps you to get some idea on making answers, and IELTS speaking is the easiest part of the IELTS exam. As long as you understand the question, as long as you are open to talking about how you feel about certain things, what you know about certain things. None of the answer has to be rocket science answer. What matters, the examiner doesn't want to know about your political or personal opinions. It doesn't matter what you're saying, but the examiner will want to know your ability of how much grasp you have on grammar, how much you can change your grammatical structure, how many types of words you can offer, how well is your pronunciation. You don't have to have an accent, but you need to pronounce the words correctly, and whether there is a fluency in your answers. I hope this video helps. Take care. See you soon again. Assalamu alaikum.